Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, Eminences, Excellencies, Chiefs, members of the Diplomatic Corps, governors, mayors, academicians. I add my word of welcome. Bienvenidos. Migration is an ancient human adaptation. Viewed anthropologically, migration is written in our genome and encoded in our bodies, in our bipedalism, in our stereoscopic vision, in our central nervous system. Migration is constitutive of the human experience. Modern humans are the children of immigration. In the modern era, migrations are complex and multi-determined. They escape vulgar mechanisms of causality because migrations unfold in complex ecology, involving broad features of statecrafts, sovereignty, managing borders, as well as demography, economy, and society. In the full paper, we address the broad features of current migration patterns worldwide. Then we turn to some definitions, and particularly the nexus between climate change and human migration. We then draw on migration patterns in relation to climate and environmental risks and endeavor to assess the impacts of climate change on different populations around the world and how mitigation, adaptation, and societal transformation need to move the needle now and moving forward. All continents are involved in mass migrations as areas of immigration, transit, and return, and often all four at once. In the 21st century, mass migration is the human face of globalization. The sounds, colors, aromas of an ever more miniaturized, interconnected, and fragile world. Today, as it has been stated by Professor Lee, by our president, and by my colleague, Professor Ramanathan, over 3.6 billion people live in areas highly susceptible to climate change. Extreme weather patterns are now very significant drivers of forced migration. Extreme weather events, we've discussed already, and slow onset environmental degradation force people to migrate. As a threat multiplier, climate change intersects with other drivers of mass migration, including economic opportunities, wage differentials, demographic imbalances, family reunification, war, and terror, forcing millions to escape and seek shelter. Migration due to climate factors is might be analytically distinguished in what the great German philosopher Max Weber called several ideal types: short-term migration, long-term migration, voluntary migration, forced migration, internal migration, international migration. Climate migration is most likely internal and from rural to urban areas. As international migration is costly, requiring significant investments of household resources, the lack of international recognitions and protections for climate migrants creates very significant barriers to international migration, and destination countries do not have the infrastructures the resettlement systems to manage the admissions of persons who cannot return home due to climate and environmental threats. Women and children worldwide are more likely to migrate locally or internally than internationally. In contrast, men are more likely to opt for long-term distances or move permanently. More educated populations are more likely to migrate internationally since they can assume the heavy cost of international migration. Trapped populations, and this is maybe one of the most important messages. The world today is facing a crisis of confinement. Only one in 100 forced climate migrants will make it to a high-income country. 1 in 100. Africans will stay in Africa. Latin Americans will stay in Latin America. Asians will stay in Asia overall. Today, hundreds of millions remain in places of extreme climate risk and must endeavor to adapt to environmental threats without the opportunity to migrate. Two rights need protection: the right not to migrate and the right to migrate. When migration is preferred as an adaptation strategy, policies must focus on assisting and protecting people throughout the migration process, facilitating the planning, the journey, and the settlement process. The interplay between human mobility and climate change presents both challenges and opportunities for global policy, even more so when climate change directly impacts human security. The need to protect individuals and communities from disruptions, threats to their well-being, to their physical security, are to be urgently addressed. We identify as the key adaptation strategies infrastructure resiliency, agricultural adaptation, water, air, energy, food. We need an entirely novel approach to mitigation, adaptation, and societal transformation in the era of climate change-induced migrations. We've seen the data, and I don't need to repeat it here. When the decision is to migrate or not, we need to put at the core the protection, the dignity, the security of people and communities impacted by climate change. We need our eyes wide open to tackle the reality that the regions of the world most vulnerable to climate impacts are today experiences the precursors of what is becoming a much larger wave of forced migration. The data suggests the potential scale of this challenge, projecting that hundreds of millions of human beings would be forcefully displaced by mid-century. To address this crisis, not only we must enhance the resiliency of vulnerable populations, but international cooperation and commitment from our governors, our mayors, need to be strengthened. Only through a coordinated approach that includes robust support systems and creative planning can the world hope to manage the impeding challenges and opportunities posed by climate-driven migration effectively, ensuring safety and dignity for all affected populations. No human being is an illegal immigrant. Thank you so much for your attention.